All right. I think we're live. I hope we're live. I hope this is working. It's great to see you all, even though I don't get to see you, but I hope you get to see me. My name is Craig. I'm a college admissions coach known as College Meister, and we're going to go live today and have a little bit of fun for what is known as College Counseling Tonight. You can find more information about College Counseling Tonight on collegecounselingtonight.com. It actually has an interesting history. Years ago, I had a weekly radio show called College Counseling Tonight locally in my hometown of Baltimore. And it actually was a pretty good success, even though it was on very late Saturday nights. And then I had to move, actually. I had to take a job for a little while in Brazil at the American School of Rio de Janeiro. And so I had to stop the show, but I always liked the concept of doing a live chat. And it was fun on uh, the radio live in Baltimore. We would get all different types of callers for College Counseling Tonight. And since that time, I've come back for different interludes with College Counseling Tonight, either audio only or visually. And sometimes I keep the videos up, sometimes I take them down. I hope to keep this one up. But the goal today is really just to talk about anything and all things related to undergraduate admissions. And what a great time of year to have a live episode of College Counseling Tonight, because the Common Application just went live on August 1st. A lot of new essay prompts have been released. More news has come out recently related to test optional policies at different big name schools. So there's always something exciting happening in college admissions, and this time of year is certainly no exception. So we have a lot of good stuff we could and or should talk about. But let's talk about how you could potentially get involved. Again, if you go to collegecounselingtonight.com, you can sign up to take part in a future episode visually where you actually ask your question of me and get your face to appear and your voice to appear. However, you're also free to take part on the fly by subscribing to my channel. And if you are a subscriber to my channel, you can, I think within like 5 minutes or fewer, start to actually ask questions on chat. So if you have any questions related to, or not any questions, I'm not going to answer every question you have, but if you have one burning question related to college admissions that you would like to get answered by yours truly, this is a forum that we can do it in. I do videos here and there when I have time. I haven't had as much time recently because there's been a huge uptick in demand for college admissions coaching services in the last couple of years, especially, but this cycle in particular. And I can talk about that a little bit later as to why I think that might be the case. But when I do have time, I do videos. But I don't have much time anymore because I'm working one-on-one with private clients. Again, to learn more about me, you can go to collegemeister.com and learn more about my one-on-one college admissions coaching services. But again, tonight, it's sort of like a free-for-all. If you have a burning question, ask it in the chat, and we'll see how this goes. We'll see if there are any questions. It is Saturday night, so probably not a lot of people are waiting by their computer to ask questions on a Saturday night, Eastern Time, US, but you never know. Anything is possible. There could be some people out there who have some questions about undergraduate admissions, anything from testing to classes to take to applications to submit, when, where, how, who, essays to write, all that fun stuff. So, we can talk about any of it or all of it or some of it or none of it, depending on what questions come through on the chat, if any. One thing I definitely do want to talk about, again, I just alluded to it, is the fact that another application cycle has just kicked off. August is a time of year when a lot of students are still at the beach or still sleeping till 1 p.m. every day. But I'm a big fan of being productive in August if you can be, and you're a rising high school senior, because if you can complete half of your applications by the first day of school, you are going to be really ahead of the curve in terms of your competition, but also you're going to give yourself the best gift possible, which is enjoying your senior year. A lot of students don't even start putting pen to paper, at least figuratively, on their applications until September or later of their senior year. And in this very competitive admissions environment where students are applying to more colleges than ever before, waiting is really not healthy, because it's going to, A, take up a lot of your senior year, but also why wait when a lot of schools have much better acceptance rates if you apply early action, and a lot of schools still offer rolling. So I'm a big believer in the early bird getting the worm, and there are a lot of ways you can do that without binding yourself necessarily to going to college X or college Y. So I'm a big believer in getting those applications ready to submit early. You don't necessarily have to hit the submit button, but use August for what it's worth, and make sure that you can wake up the first day of September feeling like, you know what, I'm done the bulk of the heavy lifting related to my college application process. I've been doing college applications with students for almost 20 years. So I've seen quite a bit change in that time period, in terms of how students uh, interact with the applications, in terms of how the applications interact back with the students. A lot has changed, and also just the process generally has changed. What tests are required, what the tests actually look like. But one thing that really has not changed is the fact that those who get things done earlier are usually in a better position at the end of the process than those who wait till the very end, both for their own physical and mental health, but also in terms of their just chances of getting in. So do give yourself that gift of trying to get things done early so you can get back to much more important stuff, which is like enjoying your senior year, getting the best grades of your life, your first quarter, your first semester, so you can impress colleges with that final grade report that will hopefully augment your overall application and transcript, which they'll be reviewing depending on when you apply, sometime anywhere between August of your senior year all the way through February, March of your senior year, depending on when they review that application. So, again, if you are interested in these types of episodes in the future, definitely subscribe. Definitely consider signing up to ask a question live. But again, you can ask your question live today. If you have a question, we will be answering questions that come across, as long as they're uh, rated G and there's nothing crazy coming along. It's a free YouTube chat, so who knows what will happen. One thing I can absolutely say I want to talk about is the Common Application. The Common Application is the application used by roughly 1,000 colleges and universities around the world, though most of them are in the United States, for students to use to apply to those colleges. Back many years ago, there was no such thing as a common application. So if you were applying to 7 colleges, you had to actually fill out 7 different applications. And even in the early days of online applications, that was also the case. The common application in the United States really centralized things. There are other forms of applications. There are some schools that have held out and have their own applications, like MIT or Georgetown or others as well. But most schools that are well known slash selective have opted to accept the Common App either exclusively or as one of the applications you can use to apply. The Common Application goes live every year, August 1st, and it did therefore go live this week. And this year's Common Application doesn't change much from previous years. The essay questions are basically the same as last year's. And I did a whole nother video if you're interested in just the Common App essay question, for instance. I did 2 videos recently. One is about the best and worst Common App essay prompts, and you should absolutely watch that, though it is long. And another video I've done recently is the most popular and least popular Common App essay prompts. And those are sort of 2 really important videos to watch if you want to be very strategic and thoughtful about how to differentiate yourself on the college application in a way that works for you, but also maybe keeps an eye toward, what can you provide the application reader that they maybe haven't seen that much of this year. So definitely watch those videos. But beyond the main essay on the Common App, there are other portions of the Common Application that cause some consternation. One of those in recent years has been the COVID essay, an essay where it basically is sort of very vague and broad, like what has happened to you during COVID. I did a video on that recently as well. Most applicants on the Common App do not fill out that optional essay, but I highly encourage my students to do so. So you can watch that video. But I'm not going to talk about the common portion of the Common App as much tonight, as I want to talk about the school-specific supplements, because every August 1st is when we get the largest deluge of supplemental questions updated. And what I mean by that is all colleges that are members of the Common App only require the students applying to them via the Common App fill out their questions, the basic questions once, like what's your address, what's your email address, what are your parents' names, so on and so forth. That basic information only has to be filled out once. That's why they call it the Common App. So lots of people are under the impression, particularly high school seniors, that God willing only have to do this once, unlike me, who's done this almost 20 years in a row. But most students are just under the impression when they hear Common App, they have to fill out one application and just hit submit to lots of different colleges. Well, what they start to often realize only once they've created their account is that the highly selective colleges and even the somewhat selective colleges and even some very unselective colleges that are on the Common Application also require school specific questions. So colleges that are members of the Common App have the option of requiring applicants to fill out what is known as a Common Application supplement. And that Common Application supplement can just have a few additional questions like, are you an in-state resident to our state? And what activities would you like to take part in if you go to our college? And so those are relatively benign questions. Other supplements are quite a bit more challenging because they actually ask students to do anything from upload a resume, optionally on their supplement, all the way up to writing a 650 or longer additional essay or more that is specific to that school. So supplements change from year to year much more frequently than the Common App essay questions do. And so some colleges traditionally have rarely changed their supplements. Other colleges change those supplements every year. And therefore, that's what leaves a bit of suspense for the college counselors of the world every year to see what will NYU require on its supplement this year? What will Penn ask on its supplement this year? What does the Dartmouth supplement look like in 2022, 2023 compared to what did the Dartmouth supplement look like in 2021, 2022? Again, most of the time, I find that these supplements don't change that much. There are sometimes big name schools that change dramatically every 4 or 5 years. What I've noticed is this year we have some big changes. And so I will touch on those briefly in just a minute or two. Big picture wise, years ago, when supplements to the Common App sort of first started, I found that there were many more supplemental essay questions that were sort of asking students to answer one big question, like why do you want to go to our college, or describe your interest in the major you've selected. And then they would give them like 400 to 600 words to respond. What I think the big trend is that I'm seeing is even the very selective colleges have increased, not all, but many have sort of increasingly asked fewer questions requiring fewer numbers of words. And so they're very different approaches. I mean, some colleges will ask 3 or 4 questions, and each one will require only 100-word response. So that adds up to a total of, let's say, 4 questions, 100 words each. You're going to be writing 400 additional words on that college supplement. But other colleges will still ask one big question where you can write up to 650 words. So there is truly no commonality between the Common App once we start talking about the supplements. Anything goes on the supplements. And as a result, it can be very nerve wracking for a typical rising senior or senior filling these out because they don't know how much they're going to have to write going into the summer before their senior year. But by the end of the summer before their senior year and their senior year starts, usually that's when all the supplemental essays have been added to the Common Application. As of today's filming, today is August 6th, most colleges have released their supplements, but there are some big name schools that actually still have not released their supplement. As of this evening, Princeton University, for instance, has indicated on the Common Application that their supplement is not ready yet. And that always happens. There are a handful of schools that just are stragglers and they haven't either finalized things in terms of what they're going to be asking this year on their supplement, or they have finalized things, but they just want to give students a little bit more time to enjoy their summer, I guess, and they don't want to upload them yet to the Common App. But if you are a senior and you are watching this in 2022, you can start your Common Application as of August 1st, 2022. And for some schools, you could even theoretically have already submitted your Common Application, even if your first day of school has not happened yet. A lot of students don't realize that they can start submitting applications this early via the Common App, but you absolutely can. And for those colleges that are rolling admission, which means the early bird really does get the worm, they review on a rolling basis and accept on a space available basis. I highly encourage you to submit those applications as soon as possible if you're applying to a Common App school via or a rolling school via the Common Application. I have had students every year that I work with one on one submit their Common Application sometime in August to rolling schools, and they will often hear from those rolling schools anywhere from early September through late October. But that's a great feeling to know you've been accepted to a college by Halloween. And hopefully you can find one or two rolling schools and add them to your list. But in any case, the supplements are really where a lot of students, blood pressure would rise today, or they get a little bit nervous or anxious, because that's where students is depending on their list. If they're applying, let's say, to 7 to 9 schools, they may have to complete 7 to 15 additional essays uh, in addition to the Common Application essay in order to complete those applications to those 9 schools via all the supplemental essays that are required of students. So big names this year have changed their supplemental essays. I have done on my YouTube channel in the past, and you can absolutely watch it in your leisure time, some full-fledged reviews of how to get into this college or how to get into that college. And I've included sort of analysis of, how to get into Michigan, and this is the Michigan supplement, how to get into Wisconsin, this is the Wisconsin supplement, how to get into this school or that school. I haven't done them as much recently, partly because this exact problem. They update these every year, and some schools, and I do love Michigan, they keep them consistent. The questions, same questions that were asked a few years ago, are still asked today on the Michigan supplement. University of Michigan is a school after my own heart. But then there are other schools that really love to mix things up. Every year they're changing their supplement. And so for me to put together a video and thoughtfully analyze this question and how I would approach it and have it only last for a few months before the next admission cycle, and then they change their whole supplement again, it just doesn't seem as motivating for me to do a full video on those. But if there are any particular colleges that you would like me to do how to get into this college video for, I'm happy to consider it as we enter into the 2022-2023 admissions cycle, which should be fun. It's crazier than ever to get into American colleges and universities with a test optional environment that we still find ourselves in at most schools. It's like the Wild West. There's fewer and fewer objective criteria that colleges are really using in order to make admissions decisions. They're really more than ever, I hate to say winging it, but they are really more than ever assessing students based off of very subjective factors. And as a result, that also raises students' temperatures or stress levels when it comes to how do they complete the applications themselves. Should they put together an extracurricular resume? If so, where or how should they put it together? And where should they put it on the actual supplement or the common portion of the Common Application? How do they approach their Common App essay? What topics should they write about? What are topics that college admissions officers want to hear about versus those they don't want to hear about? And then again, the supplements. That's really, I think, the point that sort of the straw that broke the camel's back for a lot of students, if you will. They can handle the extracurricular portion of the Common Application. They can handle the Common App essay because it's generally about them and the focus is on them and they know themselves pretty well. But once it comes to the supplemental essays, like why do you want to go to this college, or why do you want to go into that college, or what's your favorite word and why, or why do you want to study business, or why do you want to be a nurse? This is what often causes students to just become paralyzed by fear as to, how do I explain this in a way where I'm going to be impressing the colleges, but also being true to who I am, being authentic. They feel pulled in lots of different directions, often again because they're completing multiple essays at once, usually within a very condensed time period. Again, if you're a typical American student or a student from an international location applying to an American college or university, you often just give yourself a window of a few weeks to a few months max to complete applications. Again, most people are not watching this video on August 6th like they should be on a Saturday night. If you find it at all in the future, you'll probably find it on October 25th, 5 days before or 6 days before your November 1st early decision or early action deadline. So many students, if we're being realistic, really don't start their applications until weeks, if not days, before the application is due, just because most students do that. It's either because they have so much else going on in their life, or college applications, as they should, not dominate their life. They don't dominate their life. A lot of students just don't get educated about what they need to do to apply to college until maybe later than they should. So there's a lot of different factors that cause this to happen. Why am I telling you this? Well, it's because, again, if you're applying to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13 colleges, whatever the case may be, and you have anywhere from 5 to 20 supplemental essays to complete, you can understand why many students completing these supplemental essays do so in somewhat of a state of duress, which I think is really sad because, again, these are opportunities for students if they can ease into them and take the time to reflect upon what they want to write about. But many students look at these essays as sort of like obstacle courses, or like the Amazing Race, that show on CBS where where it's like this very wild adventure for maybe 30 days, and then it's over. Because that's all they give themselves is about 30 days, because most students wake up sometime in September and October and like, oh, I got to complete 15 applications or 10 applications or 5 applications in the next 5 days, 5 weeks max, whatever it may be. And so it becomes almost like a full-time job for however much time week-wise they're going to be doing it. So as a result, I like to help students try to dissect and make sense of some of these supplemental essays, because these supplemental essays need not be stressful. And I believe that about the entire college application process generally. It need not be stressful if you have the right support and if you approach it with the right mindset. In an environment that is highly subjective, which our current admissions environment is, you as a student should not be trying to be like everyone else. You should be trying to be true to who you are. Because ultimately, colleges want to accept a diverse class every year. And to accept a diverse class, you don't want to be like other applicants if you want to have a leg up in the application process. Instead, you want to be who you are, because there's only one you. Now, some students will hear that and actually take it a step further and like, how can I be as strange as possible? Because that's going to give me an edge. And actually, that's sort of true, but I would not argue that you should be a highly unusual version of yourself just to be unusual. You should just be you, because if you're just you, you're not going to be changing your style to fit in. You're going to be actually authentically you. And if you tell truthful, honest, earnest stories about yourself in these supplemental essays and are truthful about why you're applying to the college, you'll probably meet with more success than not. Now, with that said, these questions are not often easy. And some of the most updated questions have made some of the supplements to some of the most selective colleges and universities somewhat more perplexing to even college counselors than they ever have been before. And so I do want to talk about some specific supplements tonight, if you will indulge me, because the supplements this year are a real mixed bag of different types of questions than maybe we've seen before. And they're getting that much more um, emotionally focused, if you will, than they are necessarily focused on the meat and potatoes reason why a student might be applying to school. So, like I said earlier, in years past, when supplemental essays started being a thing, once the Common App went live years ago, the early sort of generation of supplemental essay questions were, why do you want to go to our college? Or why do you want to major in the major you selected earlier in the application? And that makes sense, right? You're applying to college. So you would think that the college would want to know why you want to go there and why you want to study what you want to study. That makes sort of logical sense. Well, this generation of supplemental essay questions are a far cry from that. There are still some holdover questions like that, but many of the supplemental essay questions these days are much more, shall we say, interested in your personal preferences and life outside of going to school and becoming a doctor or a lawyer or a nurse or a business person. They're much more interested in, what makes you tick at 11 o'clock at night on a Thursday night, if you will, in terms of trying to get at the very root of your person, at the very root of your soul, if you will. And what you may be saying is this guy crazy? What does he mean by this? Well, here's an example of what I'm talking about. And this has actually been a question that's been around for quite a while. But in the example I'm going to use, this is from University of Virginia. One of their longstanding questions, that they've cut down the number of words you can use to respond to it, is what is your favorite word and why? That is a classic question from UVA. Now you only have about 100 words with which to respond to that question. I'm sorry, that one actually only 50 words. to respond to that question if you pick it. That's not even a required question, but it is one of the questions you can respond to on the University of Virginia supplement. And so, if this is your first rodeo with college admissions or college applications as a high school senior, as it most of the time will be, you may be thinking, what relevancy does my favorite word have to whether or not I should get into UVA? And that is a very fair question. But I don't make the rules, I just play the game. So I'm here to actually tell you what this current state of admissions is. As to why that should be relevant or why it is relevant, that would be a question to ask the dean of admission at UVA, who I think is a lovely person. I think she goes by Dean J. I think is what she refers to herself as. But I think she'd probably make the argument, though don't quote me on this, that they want to get to know the real you, and so that's why they ask questions like, what is the last gift you gave something? I'm sorry, what is the last gift you gave something that wasn't bought with money? Or what website is the internet missing? Or after a challenging experience, how do you recharge? These are just, again, some of the options of questions you could respond to in 50 words or fewer on the UVA supplement. They also still ask a question on the UVA supplement if you're applying to the College of Arts and Sciences. If you could create a college course that all UVA students would take, what would it be and why? So at least that question sort of involves the destination, right? Something about impacting the community of UVA. But if you're applying to the College of Arts and Sciences, they're not even asking you like what major or why you want to go study with arts and sciences. They're jumping right into very subjective questions, seeking subjective answers. And again, this coupled with the fact that colleges are increasingly test optional means that there is less objective criteria with which colleges can assess you, and that's part of the design. So those of us who really like clear rules and regulations don't often enjoy the undergraduate admissions process in the United States anymore because it's basically jumped off the cliff in terms of subjectivity. It's very subjective because how can you assess whether there is a good response? What's the right word to use in a what's your favorite word and why question? There of course is no right word. What they're really trying to get a sense of, and what they would make the argument of at UVA or any of the schools that ask questions like this, is the way you answer it is really what we're assessing as a means by which to get to know you as a person better. And of course, they would make the argument that should impact their decision about whether or not they want you to become a member of their undergraduate community. The counter argument would be, if I want to study history at UVA, I'd like an opportunity to explain why I want to study history at UVA, but they don't really give you that opportunity anymore. Though you could always twist that question into it. Let's say you did want to respond to the question of what's your favorite word and why, and you do know you want to study history at UVA. Maybe the word that's your favorite is Lincoln or Churchill or Rosa, as in Rosa Parks, and then you use that as a means by which to share 49 more words about your love of that portion of American history or that portion of World War II history. And that's why you really want to study more of it at UVA. So you could somewhat sort of segue that question into an answer about sort of why you want to study what you want to study anytime a supplement doesn't really give you the opportunity to answer that question, which if you're applying to colleges in other countries that do require essays, most notably the United Kingdom, you will be asked a question more along the lines of, why do you want to study here? What is the purpose of you going to our university through the UCAS application? Why do you want to study law, or why do you want to study architecture, or whatever it may be? It's much more straightforward, much more businessman-like, whereas in the United States, it's much more like sitting on a couch with a psychologist and pouring out your soul. Whether or not that's right or wrong, that's really for you to judge. And all of us have opinions on that. But again, we don't make the rules. We just have to play the game as it's currently set up. And there are always changes. So if you're watching this as a 12-year-old, maybe in 6 years, you'll be lucky, and the process may be a little bit more straightforward. But for right now, the college admissions process continues to be quite subjective and getting more subjective by the day in the United States of America. But UVA is actually one of the more traditional supplements in the sense that they haven't changed that much to their supplement that dramatically. It's still basically the UVA supplement of yore, though they've made some slight adjustments. It still sort of reads like UVA supplements of recent years. Other schools have changed quite a bit more dramatically. And so one of those schools that has changed quite a bit this year has been New York University, which for years had a question. It was more like, why do you want to study at NYU? Now their question is this: in 250 words or fewer, though they use the word less, it should be fewer. We would like to better understand how your experiences would help us to shape and grow our diverse community. So again, whereas in the past they were asking a question like, why do you want to go to NYU? What is it about the school or the program, whatever you were interested in? Now it's more about what can you offer us explicitly that will shape and grow our diverse community. And a lot of the questions on supplements do dovetail with or intersect with the topic of diversity these days. So, for instance, for a number of years now, Duke University has asked a question related to explicitly the topic of sexual orientation and gender identity. You don't have to answer it, but the very fact that they include a question like that, of course, implicitly is communicating that they are very interested in hearing from people who do represent what they deem to be underrepresented sexual orientations, gender identities, and gender expressions. And so the specific question on Duke's supplement is: Duke's commitment to diversity and inclusion includes sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. If you'd like to share with us more about your identity in this context, feel free to do so here. Now, I am a child of, of a different generation. And so if someone had asked a question of me like this back in the day on my college application, I would have been like, get the hell out of my business. But these days, everyone likes to share because we live in the age of social media. And so I think many students I work with are not put off by this question at all, because I guess this is a topic that's discussed in schools from an early age. But again, back decades ago, when I went through this, this would have been a little bit beyond the pale, especially in the context. Again, it's not like you're going to the doctor and he or she's asking you about sort of your personal life because it impacts, your health. You're applying to college. You're applying to Duke in this case, and Duke is curious for you to share information about these very personal topics. And so again, this just is indicative of how personal some of these supplemental essay questions can be and how pointed they can be. And again, there's no denying the fact that having a question like that appear, even though it's an optional question to respond to on the supplement, of course, conveys to all applicants that Duke is very interested in uplifting certain voices and certain perspectives. And I think that it can lead the very uber strategic applicant to maybe consider being less than truthful on the application in order to fill a niche that it's quite apparent that Duke and other schools are seeking to fill. And I think that's a shame. And so that's the downside of these very personal questions, is that they can work both ways and can encourage bad actors or students who are willing to do and say anything in order to get in to craft a profile or a story that really does not comport with reality. So in the case of Duke, that was one of 4 questions, only 2 of which students can answer. They could answer up to 2 of those. The other 3 being, we seek a diverse student body that embodies a wide range of human experience. In that context, we are interested in what you'd like to share about your lived experiences and how they've influenced how you think of yourself. That one's still diversity focused, but it's broader than the sexual or gender identity angle. Number two option would be we believe that there's benefit in sharing and sometimes questioning our beliefs or values. Who do you agree with on the big important things, or who do you have your most interesting disagreements with? What are you agreeing or disagreeing about? If you choose that one, I would say on Duke Supplement, the danger in that response would potentially be making a little essay all about that person. You always got to bring the essay back to you and what it says about you. So don't get sidetracked into just writing a 250 word response to that question in response to, you have big fights with your mom, and write the whole 250 words about your mom. Always bring it back to, um, why you have those fights, what you learned from them, and how you grow from them, if you will, or the disagreements, and is it a positive? Hopefully, you can turn it into a positive thing. Those disagreements doesn't have to be fights, but disagreements. If you pick your mother or your whoever it may be. Similarly, if you agree with someone a lot, you don't want to just say, "I agree with Joe Biden on everything," or "I agree with um, Ron DeSantis on everything." If you're focused more on politics, you want to get a little bit more gray and sort of say like why you look up to that person slash um, you know what is it about that person's philosophy or approach that is attractive to you, and then again bring it back to you. What does it say about you and your value system and your character? So no matter who you pick in an answer like that, definitely always make sure to, again, dovetail it or bring it back to you. The other question you can theoretically respond to in Duke Supplement is what has been your best academic experience in the last 2 years and what made it so good? So, again, out of the questions I just asked, you only can respond to two out of those four. And you don't have to respond to any of them. The one Duke prompt that you do have to respond to is a 250 word response as well. And that one is, what is your sense of Duke as a university and as a community, and why do you consider it a good match for you? If there's something in particular about our offerings that attracts you, feel free to share that as well. Now, that's a generally broad why college essay. I mean, there are some why college essays that are much more specific to why do you want to major in this at our college? Or why do you want to study in the school you selected on the application at our college or university? This one is much broader. So theoretically, if you wanted to talk all about diversity in the supplement, you could. You could respond to that one by saying, you really are attracted to joining this particular club for your background or demographic, and you can focus that essay more on extracurricular activities at Duke. And then you could respond to question number one on the optional portion where you talk about diversity, and then you could talk about the other diversity one and the gender identity or sexual identity one as well. So you could theoretically run the table on just talking about diversity on the Duke supplement if you wanted, but you could also mix it up and not talk about diversity at all. You could touch on more academic bread and butter issues in that first question, as to why you want to go to Duke and study at Duke and what is attracting to you about Duke. And then you can also pick prompts number 2 and 3 on the optional side, where you're talking more about who you agree with all the time or who you disagree with a lot, and what does it say about you? And then the other one being, what's your best academic experience in the last 2 years and what made it so good? And you could theoretically, again, evolve that response to why you want to continue studying it or continue to explore that subject at the college level at Duke. So there are a lot of ways that you can not brand, but sort of frame your supplements in ways that are true to who you are and what's important to you. And so a lot of these supplements do give you that latitude while still giving you sort of these implicit or explicit hints as to sort of what they value more in applicants by the very nature of their questions. But Duke supplement is, again, not that unusual for very selective schools in that it's trying to get to know you as both a student and as a person. And I do think that that's a positive thing. Some schools, I think, focus too much on the academics because, of course, kids could change majors. They don't really necessarily know themselves that well at 17 or 18. And therefore, if the supplement's all about the academic majors or why you want to go into this particular career, that could be too focused on academics or career, whereas other supplements are much more too focused, in my opinion, on the personal side, like, very personal issues. I think there was a question a few years ago. I don't know if it still exists. I feel like it was at Elon or College of Charleston. I'd have to look. But like, if you won $1 million, what would you do with the money? Which again is a cute question, but the argument could be made, like, what bearing does that really have on should you get into a college or university? So I can see it from both angles, but these are the types of questions that students applying in 2022, 2023 may have to navigate as they complete their college applications. One of the supplements I definitely want to touch on that has changed quite a bit in recent years, because it used to just be a 650 word essay on their supplement. And in the last few years, it turned into two essays totaling 650 words each. And this year, it's changed again. And I think it's still at 650 words total. However, or close to 600 words total. 600 words, I think, is now what it is total. But there's three different questions, and that's Penn. I went to Penn, University of Pennsylvania. And so I, of course, take note of what's going on at Penn as a graduate. And they now have three short essays on their supplement, whereas 4 or 5 years back, they had one big supplemental essay question, like, why do you want to go to Penn? Focus more on the academic side. But you could bring in extracurricular explanations later into your draft. But again, that's changed a lot in just, again, the 3 years. And this sort of mirrors a trend I'm seeing across the board with selective schools, but a lot of schools beyond just the selective schools is they are increasingly interested in you responding to essays in a fewer number of words, but a greater number of essays. And so that can, again, create sort of an environment that benefits some students more than others, because some students like to give short, very concise responses, and they're good in writing 100 to 200 words, and it doesn't betray any weakness in their writing or thinking skills. Whereas those same students sometimes really struggle writing longer essays, and vice versa. There are some students who are really strong in writing longer essays, but they struggle to fit all the ideas they want to share into 100 or 200 words. So anytime essays change in terms of word limits, it definitely benefits some students more than others. It doesn't mean there's intended discrimination involved. It just means that there are some brains that work better writing shorter essays, and there's some that work better writing longer essays. And I'm definitely seeing the trend to be towards shorter essays and more of them, as opposed to one long essay. But in the case of Penn, they have three questions now. Number three is, well, let me go actually through number one, because this is the new one. Write a short thank you note to someone you have not yet thanked and would like to acknowledge. And then they add an extra note in parentheses where they say, we encourage you to share this note with that person, if possible, and reflect on the experience. And there's a lot of mixed feelings on this new prompt, which you have 150 to 200 words to respond to. In the counselor community, some people think that it's too similar to one of the new Common App, like relatively new Common App prompts on the common portion of the Common App about something that's something you were sort of surprised that you were thankful or gracious for. And it is similar to that question. But other people really love it because it's an opportunity, as I know the Dean of Admission at Penn thinks, for students to go through the very salubrious process of expressing gratitude, because it is known to be a healthy process to go through. And so I think the thinking goes from Penn's perspective, they want students to slow down and take a moment to think about who has helped them, who are they thankful for, and actually have student go through the motions of thanking that person, at least on their application. I think it's a positive thing in the sense that it shows that the student is capable of not only thinking about themselves and what's in it for them, but also thinking about like who has helped them on their journey, who are they thankful for, and how would they want to acknowledge that in a thank you card to that person if they actually shared it with that person. Now, the thing that's interesting is Penn also goes the extra step of saying, we actually encourage you to share this little essay or this little thank you card or note with the person you're actually thanking. And also possible and reflect on the experience. Just to clarify, and I actually asked the Dean of Admission at Penn this question, don't read that to me, because I was confused. Don't read that to mean that they want you to write a little note in the essay and then take it to the person you want to share the note with, like the person you want to thank, and then at the end of your essay, reflect on what that person's reaction was. That's not the intent, though. That's how I initially read it. And maybe, again, I'm just dense, but I read it in such a way where you could theoretically write a little thank you note, let's say like 75 words, and then take it to your teacher, see their response, um, you know, thank them face to face, and then reflect on the experience of what it meant to you to share it, either with their reaction or what, how did you feel after thanking them via the note. But that last part is not what they want apparently at Penn. They actually want, not apparently, but explicitly, I've learned, they just want you to actually write a 150 to 200 word thank you note. And I guess it, again, of course, it should be as specific as possible so that by the time they're done reading it at Penn, they know who you're thanking and why you're thanking that person. So you've got to give good, specific showing detail, which again, if you've had a good English teacher, God willing, at some point in your middle school or high school years, that teacher has taught you to show, not tell, or at least show and tell, and not just tell. And so good showing details would add color, if you will, to your final draft of any essay, but especially an essay like that, I think it's important to sort of get down the who, what, where, when, and why, so that it's clear to the Penn Admissions Committee why you're thanking that person. But I'm sure they'll get a lot of very interesting responses and will make their reading season much more lively and enjoyable and unpredictable, which is probably one of the reasons they wanted to do this. Though I have no inside information, even though I went to Penn, a lot of these admissions readers probably get bored of reading the same responses over and over again. So adding a new flavor of question probably doesn't hurt because it allows them to get up in the morning with excitement to see, a different angle of the applicants this year than compared to the 5, 10, 15 years they've been reading earlier, if they lasted in the job that long, which is pretty long in the tooth for admissions, but it can happen. The other Penn question this year would be, how will you explore community at Penn? Consider how Penn will shape your perspective and identity, and how your identity and perspective will help shape Penn. I really like that question. The only thing I don't like about that question is that they only give you 150 to 200 words to respond to it, because that question is literally how I've taught hundreds of students in recent years how to always approach a why college X essay. I just wish it's like the olden days and Penn would give you 650 words to respond to that type of question, because your challenge anytime you have a why this college essay or why that college essay, no matter how many words you have, is to always try to paint a picture of the value added for both parties. How are you going to impact that college, and how is that college going to impact you? So when Penn says, consider how Penn will shape your perspective and identity, and how your identity and perspective will shape Penn. Oh, I love it. But I don't know how you can really give that justice in only 200 words. I guess, again, in this texting generation where everyone's putting little words like LOL or on chat or whatever, I guess this generation is maybe better capable of responding in a very few number of words to a question like that. But if Penn was my first choice, which of course it was back in the day, but if it was my first choice now in 2022, I would want to have like at least 400 words to respond to that question. Because how can you really, in 200 words, explain how your identity is going to be shaped by Penn, and how Penn is going to shape you, or how you're going to shape how your identity and perspective will shape Penn? It's too much to do in only 200 words. So I wish you had more space to do that. The only other question that Penn is going to ask on their supplement is, considering the specific undergraduate school you have selected, describe how you intend to explore your academic and intellectual interest at the University of Pennsylvania. So that one is sort of the why are you applying to the College of Nursing or the College of Arts and Sciences or the Wharton School of Business or the School of Engineering essay. But again, you only had 200 words. So if you really love the Wharton School of Business, or you really love mechanical engineering or whatever at Penn, you only are going to be able to get so high in an altitude before you have to come back down. 200 words is just not that many words. And so while I really like actually all Penn's questions, I just wish each of them gave students a greater number of words that they wanted to write it. But again, you can see it from the perspective of Penn admissions readers, which is, they have to read thousands of applications. They can't read 400 word responses because all of a sudden now they're reading 1,200 words. Or what Craig would like better, which is 600 word responses, well, I guess the thank you note doesn't have to be 600 words, but the other two I think could be each. And at that point, you're at least 12 to 1,500 words. So at least 12 to 1,400 words. But so I understand, they have lives, they deserve to sleep and eat as well. These admissions officers, but for such a weighty decision as where you're going to go to undergraduate university or college, I am a fan of the approach of the business school or the School of Arts and Sciences at Cornell, which is one of the few holdouts, it seems like these days, that is allowing students to still respond in a greater number of words. So they can actually build out an introduction paragraph with a thesis and then have several body paragraphs and then a conclusion paragraph that hopefully leaves the reader just wanting more, but says also something new that builds upon the thesis. And so, for instance, in the case of Cornell for first year applicants, the um, College of Arts and Sciences asks this question: students in arts and sciences embrace the opportunity to delve into multifaceted academic interests, embodying the 21st century terms Ezra Cornell's, quote, any person, any study, end quote, founding vision. Tell us about the areas of study you are excited to explore and specifically why you wish to pursue them in our college. And again, you have 650 words with which you can respond to that one. And that I think is nice. You don't have to use all 650 words, but you can. And so for the very learned applicants to Cornell, some students may want to use all 650 words. Same thing is true with their College of Business. Their College of Business question is, what kind of business student are you? That's a tough question right there for a 17-year-old. Using your personal academic or volunteer or work experiences to describe the topics or issues that you care about and why they are important to you. So that's the second sentence of that same 650-word response question. Your response should convey how your interests align with the school to which you are applying within the Cornell S.C. Johnson College of Business, either the Charles H. Dyson School of Applied Economics and Management or the Cornell Peter and Stephanie Nolan School of Hotel Administration. But again, I'm a big fan of that type of question because if you're applying to the School or College of Business at Cornell, you have words with which to work. You have words with which to really build out an introduction and then elaborate and prove your introduction in the body and then wrap things up in a nice little bow in the conclusion. But again, the big trend, if I want you to take anything away from this particular College Counseling Tonight Live, is that the majority of selective colleges and colleges in general on the Common App, when they have supplemental essay questions, these days, the response number of words to respond are very short, very short. I mean, there are schools like Maryland, University of Maryland College Park, that have the classic sort of quick take questions where you have like 20 words or something to finish a sentence. And again, the question I have is, how valuable can that really be? But like a question like, what did you do last Tuesday? Or last Tuesday, I ... And they want you to finish that sentence at University of Maryland. Like last Tuesday, I stayed up late, or something interesting about last Tuesday was I ate a box of Oreo cookies. I don't know. I don't know exactly what the value added there is. But again, I'm sure someone who, has a lot of authority at Maryland could explain that to us. And if he or she is watching this video in the future, by all means, put your thoughts into the chat or the comment section below the video, and maybe you can edify us as to why finishing a sentence like that for several different sentences is a valuable use of everyone's time. But again, everyone has their perspective. And the college admissions process is very much an art. It's not a science. So every school does approach it a little differently, even those on the Common App. So again, that's a big takeaway from this episode of College Counseling Tonight Live as well, which is, don't assume the Common App is going to be that much of a breeze. It's going to be a breeze if you're applying to a school that accepts maybe like 80 or 90% of applicants. But for the schools on that list that do take the Common App that accept fewer than 50% of applicants, they're going to give you some, in many cases, more hurdles to jump. And those hurdles are going to show up in their supplements, and they're going to be with these types of questions, fits and starts questions. Harvard is another one that at least does give you a little bit more space to just write about whatever you want in their supplement. But Dartmouth now has some questions that are interesting as well. Again, they're shorter ones, 100 words here, 200, 250 words there. Questions like, be yourself, Oscar Wilde advised, everyone else is taken. Introduce yourself in 200 to 250 words. This is Dartmouth. What excites you is another option. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced, wrote James Baldwin. How does this quote apply to your life and experiences? Oh my goodness. The first year this essay question came out at Miami, I was quite critical of it, and I'm still not a huge fan. But I still like Miami as a school for a lot of students. I think it's a great school, but they've kept this question. I think this is the third cycle they've kept this question, believe it or not. And the thing that I think is most funny about the question at University of Miami is the number of words to write out the question is like the ratio to number of words in the question to the actual words you have to respond to it are like it's very like low. It's so listen to this. If applying for spring or fall 2023, you will be required to submit a supplemental essay of 250 words or less in response to the following prompt. University of Miami's official mascot is the ibis. Folklore maintains that the native marsh bird is the last to take shelter before a hurricane hits and the first to emerge once the storm passes, making it an apt symbol of courage and resilience. Considering your ability to control your own motivation and behavior, how have past experiences helped build your courage and resilience to persist in the face of academic and life challenges so that once these storms pass, you can emerge in continued pursuit of your goals? And I'm a guy, I once did a whole video on this. I took it down because I'm a nice guy and everything. But ultimately, there's so much happening in that question. I still wish and I implore Miami to consider in the future just asking a question like, have you faced adversity? And if so, how have you learned from it? Like, it's so much more direct. But I know they wanted to get their bird in there. And I know they, verbose, a little bit verbose, just to put it mildly. And then again, it's one thing. That's not a bad question theoretically if you're giving them like 500 words as the applicant to respond, because maybe they can really tell a thoughtful story about, you know, something that required courage and resilience, and they could really dive into that. But you only have 250 words or fewer to respond. So that's I think the biggest conundrum I have with that type of prompt, which is it's so wordy and they only give you 250 words to respond. So it's a shame, but no hate on Miami. University of Miami is a nice school, and for the right student, University of Miami is a great school. And I encourage students to really look at Miami because it's a lovely size, it's a great weather environment, and it's awesome city to be near, especially in the current economy we're facing. So all hats off to Miami. Um, Beyond that, there are, of course, changes every year. Supplemental essays are still coming out this first week of August, but all of them should be out by late August. The Common App is live, and if a college is accepting applications, you can submit it now. But there is no real benefit to applying to an early decision or early action school in August. Anytime a school has a firm deadline, that school usually does not start reviewing applicants to that school until that deadline arrives. It's only the schools that are rolling admission that really is it worth applying to as soon as the gates open, which again, there are rolling admission schools out there, and hopefully they're on your list. Schools like Arizona and Pitt and some others are my big favorites of the rolling schools. But if those are schools that could be on your list, definitely try to apply by the first day of school if your year has not started. My Brazilians, I have a lot of Brazilian students I stay in touch with, and I lived in Brazil for a while, and I'm in touch with students and families still in Brazil. A lot of their schools that are American style schools start August 1st. So actually, their summer is over, and there it's actually winter, late winter, because they're in the southern hemisphere. But in any case, for you, if you are a North American student or in the northern hemisphere, most of you school does not start until later in August or September. So in that case, try to get as many of your supplements out of the way, as well as the main Common App essay and your extracurricular resume and the activities page on the Common Application by Labor Day, so that you can then enjoy your senior year and not be stressed out by this very interesting menagerie of questions. I've just touched on some of them today, but there are so many more we could go over. We could do many, 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 many more episodes, and maybe we will, because we are scheduled to do another episode of College Counseling Tonight live later this month. I do want to make sure you are aware of it so that if you have questions for that call, you can absolutely join us either in the chat or by arranging with me ahead of time to appear live and ask your question. But the actual next episode of College Counseling Tonight live will take place on August 21st. Let me double check. August 21st. Yes, Sunday, August 21st. So we're going to try Sunday next time at 7 p.m. And that's the next time at which we can have this live interaction. I purposely chose this day to go live for 2022 because it's Saturday and I wanted to see how I felt. This is the first time doing a live episode in a while. So we have not really had anyone on the chat, and that's fine. That's okay because I just had sort of soliloquied out for an hour. And I hope you have found it somewhat educational and thoughtful. One more thing I do want to touch on is most schools have remained test optional for the 2022-2023 school year. Thank you for saying thank you, Mr. Zavian. I appreciate it. Thank you for watching, yes. But I do want to say one more thing about test optional, which is MIT went back to test required. So props to MIT. Let's give them a round of applause because I'm a big believer that test scores matter. I know I'm in the minority these days in believing that, but test scores I think do matter. They should matter. They're an objective yardstick as to how you compare to every other person who's taken that test around the world. And without them, schools are flying a plane without a radar, and they may enjoy doing that, but I think that it's important to have both qualitative and quantitative, objective and subjective ways in which to assess an applicant. And so I'm very proud of MIT for fighting against all the popular notions floating around the world these days about how bad standardized tests are. MIT has decided they are reinstating the requirement for the SAT and or ACT scores as a part of their application. And I think they're very wise to do so. I don't want to pick on any school that is test optional on this call. There are a lot of reasons that colleges have opted to go test optional. But I do want to touch on one school that back in 2020, like many schools, decided to launch their quote unquote pilot plan for going test optional. This is UConn, University of Connecticut. And in their initial explanation as to why they were going test optional, I quote, "And while UConn has already been considering whether to pilot a test optional process, the COVID-19 pandemic added impetus by exacerbating the underlying issues, since high school students currently have varying access to e-learning, preparation for the SAT and ACT, and conducive testing environments," end quote. So that was the explanation at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. Well, that was roughly May 2020. So that was a few months into the COVID pandemic in the United States. And so what has happened since that time, that was 2020 again. In 2022, in July, just basically a week or so ago, UConn put out a new statement saying that test optional application pilot shows promise and has been renewed for 3 more years. So we're well past the point of a pandemic where people are scared to leave their homes. But UConn, like most colleges that are not MIT, has opted to continue to be test optional. And UConn, in this sort of press release that they put out, has indicated that, I believe, if I'm reading it correct, I read it earlier, I'm not reading it live right now, but I'm just scanning it. But I think they said like 65% of students who applied in 2021 and 2022 chose not to submit SAT or ACT test scores for consideration. That was definitely not simply because they were scared to go to a testing center because of COVID. It was because the real reason colleges went test optional was because they wanted to up the number of applicants they got. They wanted to reduce their acceptance rates and or have the ability to review applicants from a greater diversity of applications from a greater diversity of applicants. And that's fine. That's the prerogative. They're legally allowed to do that. And these colleges, in many cases, felt that they were missing a lot of applicants because of students who felt the challenge or the process of signing up for and taking SATs or ACTs was too great, or maybe they wouldn't get the best scores. And so UConn, like many, many, many other universities and colleges across the United States, decided in 2020 to remove the requirement to submit SAT or ACT test scores. What am I leading up to here? Well, in the sort of latest press release by UConn, which is a nice school, but it's not that selective of a state university, but it's a nice school. UConn explains sort of all the good things that have come from the fact that they've gone test optional recently in the last 2 years and why they're extending it for 3 more years to study it further, is what they're saying. In their subheadline, they say UConn is seeing increases in enrollment among students from first generation low income and underrepresented populations. Well, if the real reason was doing that all along was to get more applications from that type of student, I think it's sort of sad that they waited till the COVID pandemic to do it. Like, doesn't that sort of show a lack of leadership in the sense that UConn could have made the decision earlier, but they only felt confident enough to go forward with it during an actual public health emergency? But beyond that, in the whole press release that they've released recently, they get into much more detail about, how in both of the last two cycles, underrepresented populations and female applicants were more likely to take advantage of the test optional route, which is interesting because most colleges now are majority female. UConn also saw a 26% growth in first year applicants who identify as underrepresented compared to 2019 before the pilot. But deep, 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 deep down in the press release, there is an interesting line that I want everyone to be aware of because, of course, it's buried at the very end. And here's the real money quote that they don't want you necessarily to leave the press release remembering because it's all the way at the bottom, which is, quote, while it's too early to definitively conclude how the test optional students enrolled in 2021 are doing academically, the university is seeing a higher percentage of those students on academic probation than previous years, end quote. That's really at the crux of the issue, in my opinion, which is out of the goodness of their hearts, or maybe for a business decision, these colleges have gone test optionally in mass. But what are the implications of that? And as we see here in the case of UConn, again, a school that is respectable by all means, but not nearly as difficult as some other schools to get into or stay into, they are definitely seeing an uptick in the number of these students on academic probation. And so we get right back to the idea of, isn't it important to have objective measures, objective criteria to assess students and not just subjective measures like letters of recommendation or grades earned in high school, because those are subjective too, because every school has different levels of rigor. Wouldn't it be nice to also have that extra data? Like a doctor giving you a blood test or ordering a blood test, they want to know all your blood work. They want to know your lipids, they want to know your cholesterol, they want to know your blood levels, your sugar, your glucose, all that stuff, your vitamin D, your calcium score, all these things in the blood. Whereas colleges right now, basically in their college admissions process, they're basically saying, share with us less so that we can make a better decision about whether to accept you. I think that's ultimately the real scandal here. And it's not specific to any particular college that's gone test optional. It really applies to all of them, which is, if you're an academic institution, if you're an institution of higher learning, you should go in eyes wide open, understanding whether or not the students are capable of producing similar outputs on standardized tests, because that is indicative of something academically and something in terms of their academic output. And if you're an academic institution, you should at least want to know about it. But the fact that so many colleges have gone test optional and have remained test optional, I think is really concerning. There are those standout schools that have gone either back to requiring tests, like Tennessee, Georgia, or schools that never stopped requiring tests, like FSU and UF. And again, I really don't want to make this a political thing, because I don't think it should be. I think that there is a place for the subjective and the objective in making admissions decisions. However, I do hope that now that we are turning the corner, God willing, on the pandemic, that more schools follow the lead of MIT and start to require or at least recommend standardized tests again, because it gives colleges more insight into the students there who are applying, but also who they may want to accept, in order to create an academic environment once the students arrive that will be as supportive as possible for the full diversity of students accepted, and create an academic environment where all students feel like they can succeed and that they are in company of other students who, while diverse, at least share one thing in common, which is a similar academic ability to thrive on that campus. I think that that is a positive thing, but maybe I'm too old-fashioned. But in any case, we'll see what happens over the coming cycle related to test optional admissions. And if more colleges do extend their test optional um, window, some schools have already extended it indefinitely or through 2026 or 2025. Others, again, in the case of MIT, Tennessee, et cetera, have decided to require tests again. It will be very interesting to see again how politics plays into this, how it doesn't play into it. And also, the other big thing on the horizon will be the Supreme Court ruling that will happen within the next 12 months related to affirmative action. Um, which of course intersects with this a great deal, even though many colleges would say it has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with it. And it will be very interesting. There are two cases, one related to University of North Carolina, which is a public school, and one related to Harvard, which is a private school. And it will be very interesting to see the current Supreme Court of the United States, how they treat this affirmative action year on the bench, if you will, relative to how they've treated past decisions related to affirmative action. That will have a very real impact on future years' requirements for colleges and universities. How it will affect it will depend on how the decision comes down or the decisions come down within the next 12 months, usually again between May and June. So we will know then, and that could really throw tumult into the beginning of the 2023-2024 admission cycle, but it will certainly continue to send waves into the process for the 2024-2025 admission cycle and forward, because depending on what happens with affirmative action, that will have a direct impact on how and what colleges can ask of you and how they can or what they want to assess out of you in the admissions process. So it should be very interesting. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, the world of college admissions is always changing, always fascinating, always exciting. Thank you for joining me on a Saturday night. And if you didn't get to join us tonight, we're going to post this so that people in the future can watch it into the future and learn from me going on a rant. I hope you haven't looked at it like a rant, but maybe that's what it sounds like when I didn't get any questions. And that's okay, but you should ask questions next time. Remember, August 21st, 7 p.m. is our next College Counseling Tonight live. To learn more about College Counseling Tonight, goes to collegecounselingtonight.com, and also go to collegemeister.com to learn more about me and my one-on-one college admission coaching services. Until then, have a great August. Be well, and we'll see you later this month. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.